Well, hello there, humans, hippies, earthlings, whoever you are, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, and whoever you're lucky enough to be doing it to. I'm Bushka on Blitz, and I'm here today to talk about the new Chinese tank line. Well, particularly the Tier 8, the Tier 9, and the Tier 10. I want to talk about those three tanks in particular because for me they've been very disappointing and they've not really performed at the same level as their peers. And that's not to say that I haven't enjoyed driving some of them at certain times, because they do bring something unique to the game, and I've had a lot of games in my life as a Blitz player, and so I like something a little bit different. But for all that, they are certainly not strong tanks, and I want to talk a little bit about why that is, and talk a little bit about some of the issues that you're going to find in this line and some of the things that are going to come up as you drive through them. And the reason I want to talk about those three particular tiers, 8, 9, and 10, is because I feel like the Tier 7 is where the line splits from being cheap Russian knockoffs and inferior versions of other tanks from other countries, and gets a little bit of its own style and flair, namely bigger alpha guns and strong turrets. The Tier 7, though, is actually quite a good tank. I'm finding it a very strong tank, and it's been doing really well for me. But the Tier 8, 9, and 10, I just find to be very, very difficult to output good damage in and to carry games. One of the particular things that I find in Blitz is there is a playstyle for most tanks that will accentuate the gifts of that tank and make it stronger. And there is a holy trinity, so to speak, if you don't mind me ripping off a little bit of a religious euphemism there. Gun depression, damage per minute, and, penetration. So those three things are really important in a tank. And these tanks struggle. They suffer in that they don't have any of those three values. The gun depression numbers on them are bleak. The dispersion and such in the guns too is bad. The DPM numbers are absolutely and unutterably woeful, and the penetration is poor. And what I found was that really affects the amount of damage you can output. What do I mean by that? Well, a great case study for this is the Tier 9 tank, the Wz-120. It has 2,375 DPM using the 122mm 60-122T gun. Now, the reason I'm using these guns, and I do understand that they have Russian knockoff guns that are like basically the same as the equivalent Russian medium at that tier. For instance, you can run the Wz-120 as a slightly inferior T34. And I completely would if I was trying to be competitive in the tank. And you absolutely had to get to the 121 because there is a 100mm gun you can run with 310 alpha that will, for all intents and purposes, make you a slightly worse off T54. That's all there is to it. But if you're going to run the tanks, you just run a T54, right? If you were going to run a 100mm gun. Likewise, and I mean, I don't understand this, but if you're going to run the T34-2, which is the tank you can see me rolling around in at the moment, there is a 100mm variant of that you could run. Or, again, you could just run a T44 and have 205 more alpha or 225 more DPM per minute, and like better dispersion and better gun depression. You just run that tank, that's the tank you'd run. Like, that's all there is to it. And that's fine. So if you're running the Wz-120 and you're running a 120mm gun, which is what I'm running right here on this tank, and this is the Tier 8, not the WZ. But anyway, I digress. If you're going to run that tank, you'd have 2,375 DPM. And this is to highlight the differences between actual DPM and effective DPM. That's the same exact DPM of a Centurion 7 Mark 1. The same. And yet I find the Centurion 7 Mark 1 to be my best performed Tier 9 medium. I can wail in that thing. The Cent 7 Mark 1 has 255 millimeters of pen on its APCR versus 220 for the Wz-120. So straight away there you can see you're trading off 35 millimeters of penetration for a 50 alpha advantage. That's all you get in the WZ. You get 50 more alpha. The Cent has 10 degrees of gun depression versus the 5 degrees of the Wz-120. And what that means is that there are so many shots you're going to find with a tank like the WZ, or indeed the T34-2, you can see me running in here, where unless you're on flat ground, like I am here, you won't be able to take the shot because you'll be exposing yourself to get the shot off. You have to go over a ridge. Well, the Cent doesn't have that issue. It's very, very easy for it to manufacture shots. It can ridge fight, and it can take the same DPM with slightly less alpha, but Hesh as well, and a gun that is lights out amazing at 0.29 dispersion versus the 0.344 of the Wz-120, and it can turn it into really effective use of that DPM, right? Really, really effective use of that DPM. And that's very important. It's very, very important because what you end up with is a tank that actually outputs damage in all kinds of situations and doesn't find itself stuck in a position where it can't output that damage, as you're going to see happens in this tank. Now this is obviously I'm going to use heat versus the IS-7, and that's the perfect kind of storm for a Wz-120. Exactly what I'm doing there. Kind of pushing across and getting shots in. Like, this is the greatest shot you'll ever see from any tank. Oh my god. Like, to hit that tank, the IS-7 from there in this tank, I just felt fantastic. It felt amazing. I tried to do it again there, it doesn't come up. And you can see the gun depression there. I can't get the gun down. I don't have any gun depression. A Cent could do that all day long, really, really easily. It could just edge up, fire the shot and pull back. And that's because gun depression is one of the most important and underrated stats in the game. Gun depression allows you to fire in the most types of terrain and situations. If you don't have gun depression, and you don't have good DPM, and you don't have good penetration, then your average damage and your equivalency, your ability to output average damage, is going to really suck. It's going to be really, really, really tough to get things done. Now, the Wz-120, I managed to have some decent games in it, but its damage output was quite low compared to equivalent tier 9 mediums. Like, it's the worst tier 9 medium in the game, in my opinion, which is saying something considering how much I dislike the Type 61. It's got a great turret for what it does, but the ability to use that turret is completely hamstrung by the fact that you quite simply can't go hull down and fire easily because you don't have any gun depression. You've got to be doing it on the flat, like a 62A or something like that. And the aim time is legitimately solid and legitimately good. I'm not disputing that. Your aim time is actually excellent for this kind of a gun. But for all that, I mean, 2.4 seconds is great, but you're going to see how many shots I miss in this object trying to fire AP. I switched to heat. Heat is like the worst kind of ammo to be driving this thing. It's one of the reasons why the tier 7 is so good. It's got an alpha boost that makes it different and unique in its tier. It has APCR as premo. And if you go to AP, because you can't fire through barrels and things with heat because it'll stop the shell. I mean, you get up tiered at tier 10 and you're playing against medium tanks with 3,500 damage per minute and 350 alpha and under 0.3 pen, nearly all of them really that are decent. Gun depression, like, it's tough. It's very, very tough. And you've got to really use your craft, and I did enjoy driving the tank just for the challenge. I'll quite often drive tanks that aren't strong just for the challenge, but so this is the thing. The line is so similar all the way across that's just the case. You have those three issues at tier 8, tier 9, and tier 10. You have those three issues. You just don't have anything that you can really manufacture into easy damage. Even if you get side shots on another tank, And the other thing is, like, a 120mm is all well and good, but the HE pen is not so crazy good. It's 68mm. Like, that's not enough to really reliably HE pen the sides of a lot of vehicles. There's a few in the game that you can use, and if you get pushed on by anything at your own tier, they're just going to out DPM you. Yeah, I found it to be very, very difficult. You can see here, I'm trying to deal with one of these tanks at a time, and I actually do pretty well. I managed to clear the Leo, and I'm just worried about that 268. I'm willing to take a shot from him if I can get behind him, and that's exactly what's going to happen. Awesome. But we can get behind him, we get a shot into him, and this is another one of those things. Watch the pen on this gun. This is just stuck right in the side with 220mm of pen. And then I get pushed on by the bloody T34 and cleared before I can get the last shot in. So that was an awful lot of effort in that game, an awful lot of effort, and 3,300 damage. Like, if I'm in a T54 or something, I'm cleansing. If I'm in a Centurion 7-1, that is a win. Like, I am screaming damage out, and it's the problem with this line at the top tier. It doesn't get any bonuses. It doesn't get any help anywhere. If you get to the flank in a medium tank on this map, you should be able to just farm damage out. And I don't want to go behind me because the tank has such poor gun depression that if I go behind me, you've got 3 degrees of gun depression on the Wz-120. 3 degrees. And the spot at Port Bay up there, if you've got 3 degrees of gun depression, you're going to struggle to get shots off. You really will. So I'm trying to use the front edge here. And the gun's quite unreliable, and heat overall is quite an unreliable premium round. And the dispersion is just bad. Like, it's just disappointing as a line. It's been completely balanced low, and I can understand that they don't want it to be overpowered on impact, and they've really taken a lot of care pretty much to make sure that's not the case with any of the lines they've introduced. But gee, it's come out of the oven looking pretty average. I understand that you want unique and all that, and this is the joy of it. Like, there are certain tanks, like a tier 8 Borsig, you can HE effectively with 68mm of HE pen, but you can't afford to run calibrated shells either to improve your pen because your DPM is so under the numbers. Your DPM is so under the numbers. I want to read you out a couple of things here, and these are some scary things. The T34-2, which is the tier 8, and God bless it, it does its best. It loves a go. But if you're running the 122mm gun, you have 1,781 DPM. That's atrocious. With the same pen you get on... That's 4.4 rounds a minute. If you bounce around in that... like, if you see one of these tanks in the battlefield and you have as many hit points as that and you're in a medium tank, just push it. They can't deal with you. I mean... The gun handling is poor in terms of dispersion and such, and your DPM is low, so if you miss shots, it really, really hurts you. It really hurts you. Your effective DPM is just so poor. 3 degrees of gun depression. Like, get out of town. Just get out of town. It gets worse at tier 10 too. Not coincidentally, I call files certain things, right? The file for the 121 from recording gameplay is called 121 enough. I'll show you it now. And I'm going to show you the situation for all these 3 tanks, the tier 8, the tier 9 and the tier 10, where you want to be. Now that is where you are kind of hull down and you are able to hit point trade effectively on your reload. And that's pretty much what we're doing here. So we take 319, he takes 428, and then we don't come out again until we're fully loaded. And that's a peekaboo playstyle, but you've got 400 alpha. This isn't special. 400 alpha is not special at tier 10. 400 alpha at tier 10 is completely meh. Like, it is nothing special whatsoever. It's a good roll on a tier 10 105mm medium tank. And again, this is what I'm talking about. This is where the gun can work, where you are doing hit point trades with the gun on the reload and not on their reload. So you're basically minimizing the DPM trade-off. It's painful to have to play a tier 10 medium like this. It really is. Like 245mm of pen. If you were to run an E50M, which is until now the worst DPM tier 10 medium, you would have 245mm of pen and 350 alpha with a .272 dispersion gun and 8 degrees of gun depression, plus a very, very good armor profile, right? And 2940 DPM is 2940 DPM is 500 damage per minute more than you get with the 121 with 50 more alpha, .335 dispersion versus the .372 of the 50M, 5 degrees of gun depression, same pen. Like, I mean, it just seems so obnoxiously bad to me. Look at me trying to get the gun down here. Like, having gun depression is great if you can get the gun down to use it. The T34-2 has 5 degrees of gun depression. It has 3,500 damage per minute. It has a .24 freaking 8 dispersion gun if you want to run it that way. Like, it has the same kind of aim time as this gun. And it gives up 90 alpha for it and all the other stuff it gets. Like, get out of town. It is so hard to push damage out in these things. And I don't want to be completely negative because the tier 7 is lovely. Like, if you just drive this line and get the tier 7 and be happy with that, you'll be happy. Like, and I'm moving around so that I can put myself in positions like this where I can trade off damage for distance and go hull down and work it, but they're not going to come around this way. And I'm so recalcitrant to actually push up and find myself in a one-on-one situation. Like, if I push up and found the E5 from the other side, and I ran into him, he would be able to completely out DPM me. He'd have 400 more DPM than me. 2,849 versus 2,478. He'd have another 13mm of pen on his standard AP rounds. He would have way more hit points than me, 8 degrees of gun depression, so he wouldn't be able to have any troubles in manufacturing shots. Like, it would be a nightmare for me to run into that E5 if I pushed around. So I take my time, and then I come down here and I find the 57 heavy, and I wait for it because you cannot afford to miss with this thing. And then I'm very, very patient, and that's the nature of the beast. Like, this is really what you're doing. Like, you're being very, very cautious. You're just making sure all your shots go through. You don't want to have to switch to heat because heat is trouble. Heat's not the round we want. We would rather have APCR as a premo, but we'll take what we can get. And we're moving up slowly, taking our time, looking for shots in the side of that 183. And, I mean, you can have better games than this. I'm not saying you can't. I'm not saying you can't be successful. I mean, we win this game and I do enough damage to get us across the line. But I don't play particularly amazing. And to be honest, this of all the tanks is the most disappointing because this is the tier 10, and it's just a bit of a struggle to really play a tier 10 like this. And you can't really be the Viper that you want to be in a medium tank. You have to settle for a much more passive playstyle, and I don't like that. I really don't like that. You can't afford to be caught with you have the worst damage numbers at the tier. In any effective damage trade-off, if someone can get a hold of you, you will die. Like, you will just get wrecked. It is not where you want to be. And I just want to clear that waffle, okay? Cool. And then I'll go and play a little bit more passive and get around the back. Oh, there we go. There's another medium behind me who's been kind of sniping. Really could have used his gun down here, but anyway, there's a grill, there's an E4, there's an E5 there. I'm just trying to angle out without giving him everything, but can't find him. He's not coming out. He's not going to give me the shot, so we're just being a bit more sensible again. There he is. He's fired, so we can now move. And the armor profile's fine, I mean, for what it is. It's just like a 62A's armor profile. I mean, it's quite amazing to me that they've released these tanks the way in the state they're in. Like, I just don't find them to be strong at anything particularly, and that's disappointing for me. And I think these tanks will get buffed, but really they've gone so low key on these tanks. There is no way that anyone is going to call them overpowered. And I mean, Wargaming admitted that. Look at that. No, I mean, the gun, the .34 dispersion is not cutting it on this gun. Like, if you can't have accuracy, and you're not allowed to have gun depression, and you're not allowed to have good penetration, and you're not allowed to have DPM, for God's sakes, what are you allowed to have? Trading all that in for 50 more alpha than a 105mm gun that all the other tier 10 mediums, apart from, you know, your Vipers get, seems just insane. It's mad. I mean, anyone can roll HE. That's nothing special. 526, good on you. Like, and you're a big tank too. You're pretty big for a medium. Like, don't get me wrong. So there you go. That's my thoughts on the line. I would not recommend free XPing or getting up to these, the 8, the 9, and the 10. I'd probably sit at the 7, wait and see if Wargaming buff it. And if they do buff it, happy days, drive on through. But mastery at 3,530. Early days, I know, but normally 1253 won't get you a mastery in a new line, even 24 hours after release. Still, there you go. I'm Bushka on Blitz. Look after yourselves, and until next time, stay safe on the battlefield.